All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? I am here today with Bill Strand from the Chameleon Academy. And these past couple weeks, man, I've been listening to his podcast, I've been watching his videos, and it has come to my attention that there's a couple things that we could be doing better in terms of, how we care for our pets. And I feel like, I should have been doing this a long time ago. I don't know why this information took so long for me to digest. But once it started to all set in, I'm like, I have to, come on here, talk to everybody about it, and of course, bring you on, Bill, because you've been doing an amazing job on your YouTube. And I just wanted to kind of like open up my audience to all this information. So, I do want to introduce you. So obviously, I know you very well. I've been following you for quite some time. But for those of you, or for those of my followers that may not know who you are, you want to give them a quick introduction?
My name is Bill Strand, and I run the Chameleon Academy. Chameleons have been a passion of mine, bordering on obsession, for almost 4.5 decades now, and pretty much all my life. And I have grown with the community and have been an advocate for Chameleon Husbandry all that time. I have a podcast that's in its 9th season. I have a very active YouTube channel for videos, for educational videos, and I have a daily vlog about life as a chameleon keeper. And so I'm pretty plugged in and accessible if you want information.
Nice. And how long have you been keeping chameleons now?
I got my first one about 45 years ago.
45 years ago,
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
Wow. I wasn't even a thought.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I tell you, it's been
Awesome.
amazing because I've seen the entire community grow up from before internet, when these herp groups really didn't have a whole lot of contact with each other,
Right.
to the newsletter era, email listserv era, forums, and then social media. It's like it's an amazing thing to be able to look at the growth of the community through all of these evolutions.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I can't even imagine like the keepers from back in the day, if they saw how we're doing things now. It's such a change, I feel like, and we're still learning, we're still changing. And that's part of why obviously I wanted to bring you on here. I think there is so much more information that is coming out now, or maybe has been out for a couple years, but the general public doesn't have, a grasp on it yet. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, obviously, to talk about that. I think it's it's crazy how little we know. And obviously, I mean, you've already been tapping into that, but I just wanted to ask you to begin with, like, what are some like lesser known aspects of chameleon behavior that people may not be aware of? I know, for example, like we were talking, or I was hearing in your podcast, how if a chameleon's like running to get to drink water for the mister, it's usually a sign of dehydration. And there's little things in here and there that you could see that obviously are to a regular chameleon keeper, they might not know exactly what's going on. But from your experience, what do you like? What are some little signs that you could, give us some insight on?
Yeah, and first I'll mention how amazing it is that we're at a time where we can have some of these things that are not well known. We have been able to get to this point because of essentially the internet and social media has allowed some of us to laser focus in on these species. And we're finding that every one of our reptile species has an amazing life of its own that it lives, and it's up for us to figure that out and discover that. And so I've been lucky that I've been able to do that with chameleons. And so none of this stuff is obvious.
Right.
And if I told the Bill of 20 years ago some of this stuff, it would be, okay, I understand some of it, but wow, some of it's just way out there. But that's the wonder of what we are doing as far as moving forward. And one of the things that we've discovered is what you mentioned, is in hydration. And that's actually been, hydration is something that has been given some focus in the chameleon community relatively recently. It's like the lost parameter that everybody just said, yeah, humidity, whatever.
Yeah.
But now we're finding that when we pay attention to humidity and different aspects of hydration, we can get some incredible results. And one of the things like you were talking about is that we can keep chameleons hydrated to the point where they don't drink during the day. Not because they don't drink during the day, not because they're afraid of water, but because they don't need to.
Right. I found it, just to interrupt real quick, I found this so interesting. In one of your podcasts with Peter Nekas, he was saying how he's been studying chameleons in the wild for so long, and he's never seen one drink liquid water off of droplets in the wild. Like, that just blew my mind when I heard it. And yeah, that just goes to show you that when we have our chameleons running for the mister and seeing, that water and trying to, and sitting there and drinking, it's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, they can drink and take in water, moisture, many different ways, and they will do what it takes to survive. I mean, we have during the dry, we have video of chameleons down on the forest floor drinking out of a puddle. We know they do that under duress. That's not what, they don't go down to the forest floor where they're completely vulnerable just to get a drink. They do that because they're lacking water. And what we have found is that you can hydrate your chameleon to the point where they don't need to drink during the day. A lot of this comes with humidity control and keeping high humidity. And we've been very effective using fogging to be able to do this. And some of us have been as adventurous enough to use fogging as not only the primary hydration method, but as the only hydration method, to where keeping the chameleon in a fog during the night fully hydrates them. Now, if you look at Chameleon Academy and my care guides, I don't have fogging as the sole hydration. You'll look at my care guides, I have fogging, misting, and even a dripper in there because I want to have all of these backups if I am teaching someone who's just starting out how to do this. So as David and I are talking about advanced topics in chameleon husbandry, it doesn't mean that everybody needs to jump on and get rid of everything they've been doing. Just know that chameleon herpetoculture is moving forward, and we are discovering some incredible things. And also keep in mind that there's also a lot of pushback in the community for doing anything different. And so a number of these things are highly controversial, but like fogging is highly controversial. But I did an episode specifically for this where I put it through the test. What is the two biggest tests you would want to put using fogging as the hydration method under? One would be the largest chameleon, and that would be the Parsons chameleon. I brought on James Cross, who fogged his Parsons chameleon and used that as hydration and got fully hydrated Parsons chameleons. The other one would be the most sensitive of the chameleons, and that would be hatchlings. So I brought on Sean McNeely, who fogged his hatchlings as the hydration method. And so, I mean, it's important. I can do it, and people say, yeah, but that's you. You're some mad scientist sitting in some chameleon laboratory. So, but no, it's people in the community are doing this, and it works. Doesn't mean you have to do it. If you're not comfortable with it, and it's still a relatively new concept.
Right. And it could just be another, it could be another tool to add to your toolbox of chameleon keeping. You know, it's not saying, okay, today you're going to throw out your misters and just put foggers and fog at night. No, you could start off little by little, fog a little bit for 1 or 2 hours at night, see how that goes, and just add it into your game, obviously, as you learn.
Well, this comes with another shift in the community from screen cages to hybrid cages, to where we're actually starting to enclose the cage and do some humidity control. Like in a screen cage, you can't control humidity. It's your cage is at whatever level your room is at, and generally speaking, our houses are not designed for 100% humidity at night. So your chameleon is dehydrating during the night, and that's why they drink during the day, because they got to balance that out. And we've been doing that successfully for decades. But we're now finding out we don't have to. If we can give them close to 100% humidity at night, they don't dehydrate at night. And their body doesn't have to go through that dehydration, hydration, dehydration swing back and forth.
Right, which takes a toll on their body, just like it would with any living thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to make them drop dead. We've done this decades without doing it. But as our husbandry starts going to the point where we're saying, okay, what are the micro stresses? What are the things that, I mean, they're in captivity, they're in these cages. And so there's already a number of stresses and unnatural things in their life. What can we do to remove as many of those as possible? That's what we're trying to do.
Right. Now, with you guys, you know, obviously we're talking about fogging, and like Peter Necka said that he hasn't seen a chameleon drink, you know, liquid water in the wild. You guys are suggesting fogging at night. What is like I know it's variable depending on everybody's, you know, where you're keeping it. For example, we keep our chameleons outside, so we don't necessarily have to abide by the same strategy that you do. But obviously, we want to fog primarily at night, because if you go anywhere in the day, there's not really any fog going on unless there's like a storm or something. But so we're fogging primarily at night. And for how many hours are you typically fogging? Because I know everybody's situation is going to be different depending on enclosure, on the chameleon, where the fogger is, and all these things. But just so we kind of start to conceptualize this, how are you fogging?
Let's talk about the hydration cycle. We need to give a little bit of it's everything's connected, and so we got to take apart each piece. First of all, humidity. We generally in captivity recommend up to 100% at night, and then down to 50% during the day. But that going down to 50%, just to realize that is something that we need for our cages to dry out. That's something in captivity. In Madagascar, it can easily be 90% humidity during the day. So it's that's something we need in captivity, not necessarily for them, but for us and our conditions. Right. So what we're looking at is keeping that humidity about 50% during the day, but then at the nighttime, we start raising the humidity up as if a fog bank, a cloud was coming in. And you know, I was sitting in Rano-Mafana National Park, and at nighttime, you know, it's hard to see. You shine your flashlight, and you're in a cloud. So this is what they're sitting in, and they're breathing in all of that moisture. And so when I first heard about this, I'm thinking, okay, it keeps them from being dehydrated. But I will say anecdotal evidence. I was able to measure a chameleon after breathing in all that fog, and that chameleon had gained weight. So there was actual hydration going on.
So you weighed the chameleon during the day, and then that same chameleon at the end of the night or something, you weighed it again?
I weighed the chameleon at the beginning of the night, and then at the end of the night after fogging, and it had gained 1 gram. Now, I haven't done this over and over and over again. People will say, oh, well, that's just in the tolerance range of the scale. Okay, but their poop is showing that they're completely hydrated. So, and then we're having people now doing it other than me and other than Peter Netchus are doing it long term. And it is producing hydrated chameleons long term, not only just in the proper moisture of the poop, but also the chameleons aren't running towards water or are ignoring water when they're offered it during the day.
Right. And you've been mentioning poop. Just real quick under in parentheses. Obviously, one of the, well, obvious to us, one of the best ways to tell if your chameleon is properly hydrated is through the poop. If you see, obviously very dry poop, then there's something wrong. Now there could also be if the poop is too slimy and wet, correct? How do we know how the poop should look, basically?
Well, it needs to be moist and firm.
Right. Okay.
But every poop is different. And so you've got to take an average of what you're seeing. But yeah, we judge hydration based on the physical appearance of the poop, composition of the poop, and then behavior. So those are our two tests to find out if a chameleon is hydrated. There's ways that you can pinch the skin and doing stuff like that, but
the most practical is the poop.
Yeah, it's easy. It's there. Okay, it is or it isn't. And I offer water. Do they run to the water or not? If I see my chameleons drink during the day, then I have to go fix my hydration.
Okay. Are you so I don't know if you answered, but so how long are you running your fog for at night?
I generally do it for 6 hours.
6 hours, and you have those hybrid enclosures, right?
Yes.
So
yeah. What's important is that your humidity gets up to about 100%.
Okay.
And for 6 hours from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. or 12 to 6 a.m. right before the lights come on. We don't want to fog too much while it's hot, because the hotter the air, the more the air holds moisture, and we're starting to get this whole fogging thing is so relatively new. So honestly, we're still trying to figure out how people can mess it up. And before I put together a tutorial, I need to know how to make it work. Then I need to know all the ways that someone could do it to where it wouldn't work or be dangerous to the chameleon. And I know how to make it work. I'm still working on all the ways that people could mess it up and actually do something bad to their chameleon. And this is, there's ways out there. The whole I think it's the ball python community is saying, fogging will give your snakes respiratory infections, so don't do it. And there's other things like that in the community. And so there are instances of people doing it wrong. The problem is it's really hard to figure out what that is, because when someone does it wrong, they don't say, yeah, I really screwed it up because this is what I did wrong when I fogged. No, they say fogging causes respiratory infections.
Right.
And nobody wants to look into it and see what they did wrong. It's a lot easier to just say that method is dangerous.
Right.
So it's a slow process to try to work out all these different ways that it could go wrong. And our fogging equipment is primitive. It's we get foggers from offshore, and so we can make foggers from House of Hydro. That's what I recommend, but we still have a long way to go in developing this approach.
Firstly, have you had anything go wrong when fogging?
No.
Okay. And second question, have you tried just using like a humidifier for the room?
I have not. I haven't gone that direction. The problem is, I kind of did. I used a greenhouse humidifier for my garage, and that's when I learned that garages were not meant to hold 100% humidity. So, yeah, generally we can't humidify the room unless it's specifically designed. to hold water because we're looking at getting up to 95 to 100% humidity during the night when it's cold. So that's that's a lot of water, even though it's in the mist, in the fog. It'll come down sometime.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So the problem was not with the animals or the enclosures; it was like your walls.
Yeah. My walls were peeling.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's something that people should also keep in mind if they're thinking like, oh, I'll just put a humidifier.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason having the hybrid cages. This is something that may be something new to many of your listeners. Screen cages are usually not the best cage for a chameleon. It's hybrid cages because you're able to control your humidity. Screen cage is great if you're keeping them outdoors or if the conditions in your room match the conditions that your chameleon needs to be under. And
which generally they don't.
Yeah, they generally don't, especially the humidity, because our houses aren't designed to hold that kind of humidity. Everything will peel. So almost by default, most of the time, a hybrid cage is more effective than a screen cage.
Yeah, and the hybrid cages are basically just screen up front and then 3 PVC or glass walls, right?
They would be hybrid cage would be screen solid on all sides except the top, and some vent holes here on the bottom, and that produces the chimney effect to where cool air comes in here. The air inside is heated, and so it rises up through the top and pulls air in through these vents.
Gotcha.
This is chameleons need air exchange. They don't need 100% ventilation, so they don't need a screen cage. They just need air exchange, and the terrariums and vivariums of today generally have that. Even the Exoterra, the Zoomed, they have these vents, and so you can use these standard Exoterra and Zoomed glass vivariums. This here is from Custom Reptile Habitats. This is actually the Chameleon Academy arboreal line. I design a line of enclosures that is being produced by Custom Reptile Habitats, and so I mean that's designed specifically for chameleons.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think the old train of thought was that you never want to put, chameleons in a glass cage or, something that will hold stagnant air in. And the people, now our enclosures have been evolving, and obviously, and Exoterra and Zoomed are also making way bigger enclosures that you could house even panthers in. So it's not necessarily that the glass cage wouldn't work or the screen cage wouldn't work. It just depends on your situation, because we have
and you just look at the history of it. I mean, I was there during the history of this, and back when that little axiom of chameleons need ventilation came around, it's because we were using aquariums. The glass cages of the day were aquariums, and so glass and stagnant air went together. But as time went on, the community said glass is horrible, but the glass technology in the cages evolved to where glass is not connected with stagnant air anymore. So it would have been much better for the community to say stagnant air causes health problems with chameleons, not glass, stagnant air. And so as long as you get rid of the stagnant air, glass is not a problem.
Okay, great. So now going back to the fogging real quick and how you're doing it, for example. So let's say we have what do you have behind you, by the way? Is that where your carpet is? And
this is actually being built up. It will, when I'm finally done with it, it will have a Dendrobrate azureus, a Euryplatus fantasticus, and my carpet chameleon, Furcifer lateralis.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, I saw that in your daily vlogs that you're setting that up.
She still needs to go through a deparasitization.
Okay, what size enclosure is that?
This is 36 inches wide, 30 inches deep, and 48 inches tall.
Okay, So let's say somebody's getting a carpet chameleon, they're going to have the same enclosure. How,
Okay.
where are you setting up your fogger? Is it on one corner of the cage? Is it like in the dead center? And
Yeah, the fogger is at the back corner. There is an actual a screened input, so you just
yeah,
put the fogger tube on there.
okay.
And the idea, see, fogging is something that you don't want necessarily the cone of fog to blast your chameleon. In the wild, when they get this fog, it's something that just kind of is created. It slowly
Right.
fades into existence. It's not pressurized
It's not
air.
like a tube of fog going right
Yeah,
in their face.
yeah. So I have it in the back corner. So the fog, I specifically did this so the fog would come down and just start rising up until it enveloped. The problem when you have like a fog on a screen cage,
Mm-hmm.
you just get this foot long cone of fog in front of it, and then everything else dissipates. And what's interesting is you'll find that within 1 or 2 days, your chameleon will start sleeping where that cone of fog is, just to get in that fog.
Mm.
And you'll be amazed because you only turning on at night. Somehow the chameleon knows where that is and will go and start sleeping there. And but that's because they're just desperate for nighttime humidity.
Yeah.
But I think one of the problems that people could have with fog is when it is this cone, it's a draft. And so that may be a danger point. That's something I'm looking into, but yeah.
So what would you recommend if, let's say, somebody doesn't have one of your custom enclosures that you have been working with custom reptile habitats with? They just have like like an exoterra or something. Would you just recommend having that fog go to a place where there's no branches where the chameleon can perch right underneath, and it kind of just like, basically not having anywhere where the chameleon can sit underneath that? Is that what you would recommend?
I would recommend doing it so when you fog, and you just put a tube to the fog. This will work with any cage. You don't need my fancy stuff, and just have it so where it comes down in a corner that is enclosed, so it's no screen, and that way it comes down and it can just start to fill up the enclosure. If you have a screen cage and you want to start working more with this hydration, there's this wonderful stuff. Do I have it anywhere? I don't know. There's this wonderful stuff. It's a window shrink fit window insulation. It's meant for exterior windows, where you put this double side sticky tape along the frame. You put on this thing that looked like saran wrap, and then you take a hairdryer to it, and it shrinks up and gets really tight. That is a perfect thing to use on a screen cage to give yourself the advantages of a hybrid cage. This stuff is all of like $7 off of Amazon. So
Okay. What's it called again?
It's let me see if I can find. It's shrink fit window insulation.
Okay. Well, if anything, I could also just put the link down below.
Yeah, I can give you a link. You know, I talk about it often. I mean, I've got a cage right here. I could show you. But oh, you want to see it?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
All right. So let's see if I bring this on over. Let's see. Are you able to see? Let's see. I'm gonna do this just so if you see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. It's like a plastic.
It's just plastic, and it's meant for literally for insulation, and it doesn't hold heat, but it does hold in. I mean, when you want to spray your mister, it's no longer going outside of your cage and hitting the walls, and it will hold in the fog. So I do the sides, back, and the main door, and possibly some of the flip up service door. All you need is an inch of ventilation at the bottom, and that gives you that that air exchange.
Okay, awesome. Now moving on from the fogging, I know we could go, for a long. We could do this whole podcast just on the fogging, and if you guys are interested in more information on that fogging, trust me, Bill has a ton of videos out there on this stuff, so definitely go check that out. But just so we keep it moving forward a little bit, I wanted to discuss with you the importance of UVB
Yep.
and the supplementation in chameleons, because we see a lot of issues that could be easily avoided if the proper lighting was used, or if just proper supplementation was used.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I
With
always
chameleons,
yeah.
I was just say with chameleons, it is UVB is critical. That is, in some communities they're debating whether the animals need UVB or not. That has never been a debate in the chameleon community.
The only time your animal does not need UVB is if you live in Florida and you keep them outside.
If you keep them outside, they're getting natural UVB. That works. But if they're
otherwise,
inside,
you're going to need UVB.
now we did. They either need UVB or they need dietary D3. So
Right.
that is actually how we kept our animals healthy before we had UVB lamps. Is we had dietary D3. Problem with dietary D3 is that D3 is a fat soluble vitamin, and so you can get an overdose, and then you start getting calcification on the organs, and it's pretty ugly. The body does not regulate how much D3 it takes in through the diet. It only regulates the D3 and turns off the D3 spigot when it gets D3 from exposure to UVB. So that is why, even though we were able to figure out that balance and figure out how to keep chameleons healthy through dietary D3, that's why we made the transition to let's do UVB only, because that's the natural way, and that's the way that the body can control it to make sure there's no overdose. So we have found out with panther chameleons and veiled chameleons, and it seems to be working with most of the other species, is that a level of UV index of 3 at the basking branch seems to be sufficient. And we tested that by having females, both female pardalis panther, female veiled chameleons. We had them have access to UV index of 3, but no dietary D3, and they laid perfectly calcified clutches of eggs. That was our test.
Okay. Now what? So for those that are using D3 in the supplementation and they have their UVB bulb all set up, how often should they be using vitamin D3 in the calcium? Like, do you feed it once a week? Are you using every other day? How are you doing?
Panther chameleons and veiled chameleons, I use Repashy Calcium Plus Low D once every 2 weeks. And that is actually not for UVB or for getting D3. That's because that's when we give the preformed vitamin A. And there is some unholy relationship between vitamin D3 and vitamin A, which I don't understand, and nutritionists don't fully understand. Even in humans, we don't understand it, but they seem to have some sort of relationship to where at this point, it just seems like a good idea to give vitamin D3 when you're giving vitamin A. But, I don't know why. That's just why I do it. But when you have UVB, a good solid UVB system, you don't need to do dietary D3 at all, at least for calcium absorption.
Okay. Okay.
And I showed that.
So obviously we recommend getting one of those UV meters that you could check your UV, because some I've had UV bulbs that out of the box are not putting out what they're supposed to, and obviously over time they start to wear down.
Yeah, that's a solar meter 6.5, and that is one of the important pieces of equipment for a chameleon owner. And they're expensive. They're like $200, and we know it's painful, but there is yet to be a cheaper alternative that actually works. And so it's just one of those things, bite the bullet and get yourself a solar meter 6.5. And as they was saying, I have a daily vlog. And on one of those vlogs, I decided I was going to show how I tested my UVB lamp. And I went to test it, and it was unexplainably low. It was a new lamp, and it was supposed to be like twice the level that it was. And I'm sitting here on camera going, okay, well, I guess this is a good demo. I thought this was going to be a boring demonstration, but apparently we found something, and it was a complete surprise to me. And unfortunately, I mean, and I keep track of when I replace the bulbs. So this was an example where I keep track of things, but something happened. I don't know. I still don't know what, but I was able to catch it. And unfortunately, we don't see UVB, so we won't know that there's no UVB coming off of that until it's too late.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's super important tool to have, along with like you know, temperature gun and everything else. So what is a supplement that you what calcium do you use mostly?
You know, any calcium works.
Yeah.
Plain calcium is plain calcium. There isn't really different grades. I've used the Arcadia Earth Pro A. It's calcium with bee pollen and some carotenoids, no fat soluble vitamins. And I've also used, when that wasn't available, I used plain calcium powder, anyone would do. And I crushed up bee pollen and mixed them together. And then I use Repashy Calcium Plus Low D when I want to do a multivitamin.
Okay. And with the bee pollen, is there such thing as overdoing it? How? Because I know I'm going to have a list of people that are going to be like, oh, I'm going to start adding bee pollen into my, you know, my supplementation schedule.
Bee pollen is one of those things that theoretically is a great thing, but I don't know of any evidence, actual studies which says this is done something. I've always used it, but nutrition, a lot of our nutrition is just guessing, and this is no different. It should be good. I mean, bee pollen is found on bees and such that chameleons eat. So, you know, this is
and a
all,
lot of flying insects.
so as for overdose, I don't know at this point. But everybody remember, for everything that's good in life and good for a chameleon, you can't overdo it. So the key to everything is just do a little bit, and you know, doing more is not magic. It just overloads the system.
Right. What do you typically like to gut load your insects with?
I use fresh fruits, vegetables, and various cricket grains. That any of these cricket meals that are sold are good enough. And the thing is, cricket, once again, we don't know what happens to whatever we give them, what happens to that in the body, and then how that goes to the chameleon. It's a guess. And besides, the stuff that we feed chameleons, the crickets and the dubia, the superworms, those are all nocturnal. And so their body composition may be different than the diurnal insects that the chameleons would normally eat. So a lot of this is just, we think this is good.
You know, there was a study, I forgot the gentleman's name who did this study, but at the Gecko Symposium in NARBC this past March, so last year, there was this gentleman that did a study on exposing insects to UVB, and how a lot of the insects were they were showing, I think it was a higher levels of D3 in them, like the same insects. So they'll put like a cricket indoors, and then they use another cricket and they expose it to UVB and a variety of different insects. And it was crazy how exposing just the insect to UVB will actually raise up the levels of D3, and it's crazy. Like a lot of stuff that, you know, we don't even really think about.
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
that
we
is
still want
still,
to know where chameleons get their vitamin A.
yeah,
They
yeah,
either convert carotenoids, which has been Gary. There was a study done talking about that beta carotene was not converted, at least not as an isolate. But if they don't convert carotenoids or any carotenoid, then where do they get their vitamin A?
right,
The insects are very poor sources of vitamin A. So there's so much that we don't know, and we're making
yeah,
guesses at.
right, yeah. There's a lot to learn still, which is honestly it's kind of fun because there's still a lot of room for improvement.
And that's why I'm coming on to this podcast, because I'm talking to your audience, David. Guys, girls, everybody, figure this out. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Start adding data to the big picture of
Yes,
like
yes, that's your
information.
job. Please,
Yeah.
somebody out there, figure this out, because it's been a real conundrum for us.
No, Bill. So we talked a little bit about the hybrid enclosures, but from your experience, what are some key considerations when designing and implementing like an enriched environment for your captive chameleons?
Okay.
Obviously, we prefer those hybrid enclosures we talked about, but how many are you giving them? Bit different basking spots. Obviously, are you giving live plants? What live plants are you using? How are you setting up your most of your enclosures?
Okay. Well, I'll start off by saying before any enrichment can happen, the most critical thing is that the chameleon has a sense of security. And so that chameleon needs to feel like they can get away and hide. And this is where dense foliage comes in. So every enclosure, cage, chameleon home needs to have dense foliage that the chameleon can hide behind. One of the biggest dangers or mistakes that people fall into is what I call the picture box mistake, where you look at the cage and it is a beautiful cage with all this living plants and the chameleon right in the front, but there's none of those plants that the chameleon can get behind. It looks beautiful to us, and it looks
Yeah,
like there's all sorts of plants to us, but to the chameleon, they can't hide. They are always on display. So it's not just about putting a bunch of plants in the cage, it's about arranging them so the chameleon can get behind them. You should only see your chameleon when they decide to come up and hang out at the basking area, like the top 9 inches of the cage. Should be open for basking, UVB, and all that wonderful stuff. And then the middle third of the cage should be a thick jungle. And
yeah.
that way, well,
I was gonna say one of the plants we use here a lot, especially for all like the smaller species, Jacksons, carpets, is I forgot the scientific name, but they call it umbrella plant here,
yeah,
and it's
Schefflera
just
arboricola.
yes, exactly, and that's
That's
a
a good
great.
one.
We've had a lot of we have a lot of success with that because it gets really bushy, especially outside here, and they could hide
Florida,
in
yeah.
plain sight. Yeah,
And pothos is a great one. We've used pothos. I mean, you go look at the one back behind me. That's a special pothos. That's a Cebu blue.
yeah,
So it's a little bit. I kind of become a plant nerd, and I love gardening in these enclosures. But you
yeah,
see that that's a huge, thick thing, and a chameleon can go inside of there. Now,
yeah.
it doesn't mean that the entire cage has to be filled with plants. All it means
Right.
is there's got to be an area that is thick enough that the chameleon can go behind it and feel like they are hiding. I mean, that the chameleon's defense, you got to get into the mind of the chameleon. How does a chameleon feel safe? It's when they're not seen. They don't have claws, they don't have armor, they don't have all this defensive stuff to where they can sit out in the open and saying, "Come get me." No, they have to hide. They're soft and good to eat.
Yeah.
So they know their
Yeah.
best defense is being inside of plants and not being seen. So give that to them. That is the number one place to start when you're wanting to enrich your chameleon. And after that, it's having a a lot of things in their living area to details. I mean, they have brains, especially as the babies, they need those brains to be firing off. They need things in their cage. We don't know how much they need. This is so new to our thinking, and we're working. And this is right now. This is what I'm calling the enrichment generation. If you hear my podcasts, because this is really the first generation of, and when I say generation, I mean of people coming into the hobby, not just your chronological age, but when you're into the hobby and saying, okay, I'm here, what's going on? This is the age where they're starting to care about chameleons and the brain and their emotional and mental development, which is an amazing stage of our community growth. We started off with how can we keep them alive for more than 6 months? I was there for this stage. I'm glad we're past that stage. Then it was, how can we breed them? Then it was, how can we breed them consistently to the point where now we have businesses that can breed them consistently. And you get these panther chameleons, different morphs that are always available. Huge accomplishment. Now it's to the point, how can we enrich them? How can we care about their mental and emotional health? And so this is the generation that cares about that. All the other stages were absolutely necessary to be able to get to this point. And unfortunately, there's a number of, you'll find people all over who have stopped at any one of those stages and says, okay, I'm done. We don't have to go any further. But the people starting now are looking at all of that saying, thank you very much. Now, what can I do to really focus in on how to do a healthy, holistic approach to these chameleons? And so the environment, what's surrounding them, have it have plants and insects, different feeder insects. Every now and then release a fly in there, a flying insect, green insect. And so all of these things are things that their mind says, hey, I like that. Don't worry about if a hawk flies over or they get a little bit of stress. As Philippe de Vaugelet says, stress is life, or life is stress. That's what he says. But that's a stress spike, and it gets the blood moving. That's okay. It's the chronic stress, like cohabitation, always having a chameleon in with them. They don't like to be together. That's going to kill them. And so provide this kind of all these different variations in their environment. And I'll say, we really don't know.
Yeah. Also, obviously you touched on the different insects. I was going to say that, but creating different environmental factors, like, for example, I forgot who I heard say this once, but it's like, one day the lights don't have to turn, the heat lamp doesn't have to turn on. You could just have it rain all day. Or if it's a little bit colder, you don't necessarily have to, like, put some heat on it. You could have them go through a little bit of these different environmental changes, and they could ultimately be good for the chameleon.
Yeah, and one thing I'm looking into is the dry season. What happens during the dry season? Yeah, we know it's harsh on some chameleons, but it provides 6 months of rest for a lot of chameleons. And so that's half of chameleons' life that we really haven't paid attention to. So having annual, seasonal changes is something that we can do. We can, I'll be very careful when I start talking about this, but there are some chameleons that do not show a whole lot of fear about humans. And so we can actually have some sort of enrichment that has interaction with human beings. Now, I know, okay, let me stop. A lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, Bill Strand says that we should not be touching our chameleons, not holding our chameleons. And yes, Bill Strand does say that. But there is some interaction that you can do with your chameleons, some chameleons, as long as they are always in control and they can always escape. They're not trapped. And one thing that I am doing right now is, and anybody wants to follow along on my vlog, I have a daily vlog at 5 a.m. on YouTube, and I talk about how I'm training one of my shamrock chameleons to ask for silkworms. And what I do is every time he comes up and perches on a branch that is out in the open, so it's not like a place that he would be to feel secure. Once he perches on that branch, I always give him a silkworm. And so I am working on, see, this is part of the taming. The first thing is getting them okay with your hand in the cage. Then it's getting them excited to see their hand in your hand in their cage. And so that's when they know, okay, we got good stuff. And I wanted to take it a step further to where they ask for my hand in their cage. And you notice in all of this, it's not grabbing him. It's not putting him on my arm. It is there. He is 100% always in control of any interaction. And so this is a healthy approach. And this can be, I think I would argue that this could be a part of enrichment. They're using the brain. Anytime they're using their brain, that's enrichment.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm gonna keep up with you to see how that chameleon starts to learn that. I think they're a lot smarter than what we give them credit for. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's been showing signs to where I can at least imagine that he's doing it. But then the last time, I think it was yesterday, I went on the blog and said, all right, everybody, let's try it. And he kind of shied away from me. I said, okay, so he's not asking. All right.
Yeah.
But
you know, sometimes the camera spooks them, though. Every time I have a chameleon out or something, if I take out my phone or a camera, they're like, all right, I'm out of here. They suddenly become.
They do not like cameras.
No. Some people tell me it's because of it looks like a big eye or something. I don't know.
I don't know, because it doesn't matter what kind of camera it is.
That's
they seem
true.
to know that it's there sucking out their soul.
That's funny. No, so obviously we've covered like some of like a little bit more advanced husbandry of how we should keep chameleons. And now I know when it comes to, you know, obviously there's something wrong. The chameleons will start to decline pretty quick, and once they start to decline, if you start seeing eye issues, that's usually kind of like towards the tail end of what's already happening, and it's something that should be taken care of immediately. But an issue that I see a lot, and I even messaged you the other day because we got a panther chameleon that somebody didn't want anymore, and it has a foggy eye. Now, looks on the other side of the chameleon, his other eye is fine, looks normal, moves normal, but obviously there's like a little bit, it just looks like a little foggy eye, and the eye is a little bit, it's not as protruding as the regular eye. Yeah. So, you know, because I don't have any other information on how this chameleon was kept, it's hard to go about how to treat it. But one of the main, you know, issues that could arise from low vitamin A levels is eye issues. Yep. So what do you, if somebody has a chameleon that is starting to develop an eye issue, a foggy eye or one closed eye, what are some things to start to kind of like tighten up on? What do we look out for, and what do you suggest?
Okay, eye issues in chameleons are difficult because the eye is the window to their internal self, and if anything goes wrong with a chameleon, it has a good chance it's going to show itself in the eye. So we have two things that show up on the eyes. One is a condition with the eyes. This can be a physical problem to where they brushed up against something and they hurt their eye. It could be the debris, physical debris in their eye. It could be vitamin A levels are low, and vitamin A deficiency is common in chameleons, and the eye starts crusting over. And this is part of vitamin A deficiency, and that is solved by giving them vitamin A. The debris in the eye is solved by a vet using a special tool or saline and getting that thing out. Uh, and there could be an infection, a bacterial infection. There's a lacrimal nasal duct that goes from the mouth up to the eye, so the eye can drain and do healthy stuff. But if you get an infection in the mouth, like you chomp on a cricket, or it bites you, or a spur gets in their mouth because they're chomping on a grasshopper or something, and you get an infection, it can travel up that tube, and your eye just starts to. This is where they start to expand.
Mm.
That's antibiotics. And so I've just given you 3 examples of what
Right.
what could be, and the care of those is completely different. If they have vitamin A deficiency and you give them antibiotics, it's not going to do anything. And so that's why when a chameleon has an eye issue, the best thing to do is get to a vet and figure out what it is before you start treating something.
Right.
Because whenever something happens with the eye of a chameleon, your time is limited. You don't have time to try 3 different things. So if you don't know what it is, you get to a vet and figure out what it is. In addition, if there's anything wrong internally, their eyes will start to close and sink in. Parasitic infection, bacterial infection, viral infection, respiratory infection, which is bacterial, but anything going on, and they'll just start getting lethargic and their eyes will close. And so once again, you now have life-threatening things going on inside that every single one of those is treated completely different. So once your chameleon starts closing their eyes during the day, that is the time to get to a vet and figure out which of all these things are wrong. Some of these things can be determined with a physical exam, some with a fecal exam. So that, eye problems, that you are not overreacting by overreacting.
Right. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. You got to get to it quick.
Yeah, and the thing is with chameleons, they hide it. And by time when you get to be a good chameleon keeper in years and years and years, you can pick up the subtle clues that something is wrong before the eye starts shutting. And that's when the chameleon can recover, is when you get it so early. And I tell so many of the chameleon people that I talk to, you get to the point where you observe your chameleon and there's something wrong. You can't put a finger on it, but you feel that there's something wrong. Trust your instinct. That is when it can actually be treated successfully and easily. And it's like, that's the art of chameleon keeping. And I'm sure it's the same with all sorts of reptiles.
Right.
That's where it's the art. And we haven't gotten to the science yet. So this is the art and the science of chameleon herpetoculture.
Yeah. Is there any, for example, like anything you gut load your insects with that will increase vitamin A, that are high in vitamin A? I think maybe apples are high in vitamin A. I'm not sure. Or is that just nothing's been actually...
The thing is, we haven't proven that we don't know what happens to whatever the crickets and dubia eat. And we don't know how the chameleon's body uses that. So I throw a bunch of stuff in there that I think is doing good, but I can't tell anybody that I know that it's doing good.
Right.
For the preformed vitamin A, I have the Repashy Calcium Plus, and I'll be using that until I know better.
Right. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people who feel very strongly about certain aspects of nutrition, to the point where I wonder what's got them so sure of themselves, because we just don't know. There's so much we don't know. We need to know. So once again, listeners, we need you.
Start experimenting.
We need you. Become scientists, please.
So recently,
figure out how to get funding.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Start to get funding for our chameleons. Recently, you took a trip to Madagascar with all the YouTubers, Dave, Dion, everybody went. You guys, it looked like you guys had a great time.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I was super envious seeing you guys hold the big Parsons and the Panthers and the carpets. But was there anything from that trip in particular that you took away and you made a mental note that you were like, okay, I'm going to implement something different back at home?
There wasn't anything in particular that I said, oh my gosh, I can do this differently. Uh, but there is something about being there that you feel what it's like to be there. And when you have that feeling, you can stick your head inside their enclosure and say, does this feel the same way? How can I make it feel closer to that? I mean, and one thing, I don't know what the solution to this is, but yeah, we've got our enclosures and they're hybrid enclosures, so they hold in the humidity, but you know, it feels different than when you're there at Madagascar. It can be 90% humidity, but it doesn't feel stuffy. It doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, it's hard to breathe because there's so much water in the air. It's light and breezy. And that's something that we all need to aspire to, is figure out, how do we recreate that in our enclosures? I don't have the answer to that, but at the very least, I know what the problems are that we need to solve. So.
Yeah. Did you see any particular insects that they were mostly eating on? Were they eating mostly flying insects, grasshoppers, roaches? What?
They would eat anything that would move.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be there, and if there was any insect anywhere nearby, boom, it's gone. So
yeah.
They're not picky at what they eat.
What were the most like prominent chameleons that you found over there?
Well, we were moving around a lot, and so we would go to different areas. But Usuleti was around a lot, many different areas. The Crypticum, Kaluma crypticum, it's kind of like brevicorn. Well, so close to brevicorn, people confuse them. I mean, in the Ranoafana area, I mean, they were all over the place. O'Shaughnessy was pretty common. So when we go to these places, it's amazing how many chameleons you see.
Yeah.
And even road herping, stopping at the side of the road. There's chameleons all over the place. So it's an amazing place, an amazing experience.
Man, I hope to go one day, man. That looks so awesome.
And you know, I will admit, I have spent many years being totally inept when it comes to identifying and finding chameleons in the wild. It's like, I remember I went to Florida with Peter Netchus, and we were out there in the middle of the night, and he says, okay, there's one, and there's one. And I'm thinking, I still don't see it. It's like, this guy was, what the heck? I'm a chameleon guy. I just look in my cages. I know exactly where they are, and it's a tree. But finally, in Madagascar, I got my chameleon eyes, and I was able to now start picking them out all over the place. So, whew.
Yeah, it's not easy. I remember, I mean, I live here in Florida, obviously, but I don't go out herping as often as I would like. But I remember, like, especially the first few times I would go and we're just shining and we're trying to find stuff, and I'm like, I don't see anything. And then once you start to see, like for iguanas, for example, they kind of like reflect a little bit, and you can kind of see their underbelly, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then you start to get an eye for it, but definitely takes some experience.
Yeah, and with chameleons, you got to be careful with your flashlight because their skin is photosensitive. So you shine it on them and they're reflective, but then the skin starts adjusting to the light. So you can't hold it on them or else they essentially disappear. So it's like you got to keep moving back and forth. So little tricks of the trade.
Nice. That's awesome. Can't wait to go one day. So obviously we want to promote responsible herpetoculture. We want to make sure, the whole reason why we're doing all this, why we talk about this, is because we want to push the envelope and try to make people, you know, excited about these animals, but we also want to keep in mind that they are living things and we want to make sure that they're being treated as such. So is there any particular like conservation efforts or sustainable breeding practices that you want to basically push or talk about that you're
The best thing for everyone here to do is to go beyond the minimum and create gorgeous, and if you're with chameleons, create gorgeous enclosures that are bigger than the minimum and are beautiful to look at. Not only are effective for the chameleons, but beautiful to look at. And then post those to social media.
Yeah.
The best thing that we can do is be a good example for all the people who are coming into chameleon keeping. And our community is growing. So there's plenty of people out there looking for examples. Be an example of the best husbandry, not having how many chameleons you have, not how minimalistic you can make it and keep them, but how beautiful you can keep them. Large cages. Be an inspiration to the people who are just joining now. And the reason why I use that as an example is because we are experiencing community growth right now that has brought a number of amazing benefits to us. Companies are starting to create advanced products to give us advanced husbandry. Vet offices exotic vets are starting to be able to specialize in exotic animals, not just do it as a side because they pay their bills with cat and dog visits. No, they're able to now start really focusing in on reptiles. And this is because there's a big enough community, and that community cares about their husbandry enough that this isn't just a throwaway stuff. This is a valued member of the family, and we're going to give them the best. That kind of attitude is creating a stronger community. And that is the best thing that we can do. As far as conservation, there's organizations like the Eden Project that actually brings back forests, and so that is a good thing to go into. But as far as chameleons in the wild, unfortunately, there isn't much that we can do. Yeah. The exports are tightly controlled by CITES, so they're already controlled, and they will decrease to zero when they become more threatened because of habitat loss. So that's pretty much taken care of. Our breeding efforts are not going to affect the wild populations, and the demand plus or minus here is not going to affect the wild populations. And so turn your attention towards strengthening our community. Right. And that would be where your energy is best spent.
Yeah, I agree. Every individual has to do, like you said, setting an example for everybody that's coming up, especially with a lot of social media being so big right now, and a lot of people that are just trying to. One of the best parts about this, and one of the worst parts too, but it's the community. So like sharing your enclosures with everybody. I also want to add that you vote with your dollar. So if captive bred animals always going to be worth a little bit more, but in the long run, you want to support those breeders that are trying to produce animals in captivity versus those that are just importing animals and selling those. And obviously, we've bred chameleons in the past. We don't typically breed them anymore. We're now getting some captive panthers from a friend, but we do, sell imported chameleons as well. But there's always kind of like a struggle because, everybody wants like the cheaper chameleon, but then they also have to understand that that same chameleon, you should be an expert keeper. Even more so, it's already a hard enough species to keep because it is a chameleon, but even more so because it's an import, you should be like on your game. And
save the imports for breeders.
Exactly, save the imports for breeders, or you don't necessarily have to be like a master breeder or whatever, but you have to be well researched.
I mean, anybody can get a wild caught that can go through the acclimation process, the deparasitization process, if that's what you want to do for some reason. But if you're getting a wild caught chameleon because you want a cheap one, this is you're heading down the wrong road.
Yeah, you're gonna end
that
up.
chameleon will have a short life if you are looking to save money.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, vote with your dollar. You know, start supporting those people that are. I see. It's a shame because I see a lot of particular species of chameleons that nobody works with because they're imported in high numbers and they're very cheap. So it's hard to compete with those people. And then, you know, down the line, if those imports stop coming, we're not gonna have any here. But something to think about.
I spent a lot of my time trying to encourage breeders of carpet chameleons. This is a great chameleon to get involved with. We have more and more captive breeding happening, and you could do so much for the community just by buying captive hatched carpet chameleons.
And it's one of the most beautiful chameleons you could find.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The death of our captive breeding projects is when the breeders can't sell their babies.
Yeah.
So if you want to help the community, buy a captive hatched baby from a breeder.
Yeah. Bill, thank you so much, man. I think we really went through and got into the nitty gritty on a lot of these things. But as always, we could talk about this for 3 days straight if we wanted to.
Oh yeah.
But I want to give you the opportunity to plug in all your stuff. Obviously, I've already mentioned it a couple times. If you want to get into more detail, which as a chameleon keeper you should, definitely check out Bill's channel at Chameleon Academy, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I do an active outreach. If you are involved in chameleons, there's a number of opportunities you have. I have 2 live sessions a week on YouTube. That's a Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, and then Saturday at 12 noon Pacific. And those are live sessions, fully interactive. You come, you ask your questions. It's like office hours, and I just answer. Sometimes I have guests.
Nice.
Every morning at 5 a.m. Pacific on YouTube, I have a vlog, which is a premiere. So there's a live chat where I'm there, and I have a very cool group there that says good morning. We use it to start the day. You're welcome to come by. And that it's a casual way of just showing what the life of a chameleon keeper is like. And the chameleonacademy.com is a website that is a huge website, almost unmanageable. I just keep adding to it, but it is the largest collection of Chameleon Husbandry. It's from I'm in my 9th season of the Chameleon Academy podcast, which is an audio podcast. I've interviewed over 100 people. So the chameleonacademy.com website is not just me. It is the conglomeration of 100 keepers, breeders, veterinarians, and scientists from around the world coming together to create the best husbandry and move it forward. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. I want to thank you, man. I since I discovered you, it's been a couple years, obviously, but I think you've done your best in pushing the envelope when it comes to chameleon keeping. And I want to thank you for that because, dude, I as a keeper, I'm very grateful for you. And I'm not this is not my only thing. I do a lot of different stuff. I'm mostly geckos, but a lot of this stuff can transfer to other species, especially arboreal lizards, which is my favorite stuff. But thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. I think you are a gem to us, to the chameleon community and the reptile community as a whole. So I always appreciate when I get to talk to somebody like you.
Thank you very much for having me, and we'll see you later, Tiki Gecko world.
See you guys. We're also dropping these new chameleon shirts.
Oh, nice.
So if you want to support the channel, guys, make sure you check it out on the website. I'll put the link down below. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. And go listen to some podcasts.
That's right. That's right. Join me at 5 a.m. Pacific on YouTube. See ya.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.